Hey, what is going on, everybody? It is Rob, aka The Diligent Dev, and welcome back to part 3 in this series covering Azure Functions with Node.js. In this video, we're going to refactor our API endpoints a little bit, add some middleware, and I'm also going to show you how to deploy your functions to Azure. So without any further ado, let's jump over to the computer and get right into it.
Okay, so here we are over at the computer, and the first thing we're going to do is refactor our endpoint naming convention. So when you create a REST API, typically your routes will have the exact same naming convention, such as /blog post, but then you're going to pass a different HTTP verb, such as get, post, put, delete, telling your API exactly which endpoint you want to hit, even if you have identical routes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into each one of these. We're going to go to the function.json, and we're going to specify the route for this one. So in here, we'll just say route. And then we're just going to pass in blog post. Then we're going to go to the delete. And instead of the route being delete post /blog/id, we're just going to do blog post. And if we go to get all posts, go to the function.json, instead of get all posts /blog, we're just going to do blog posts. And we'll go to get post, do the same thing. And go to update and do the exact same thing as well. So then if I go ahead and save all of our changes and we fire up a development server, we see our routes and all of them are API/blog post. And if we go through here, although these all look the same, like this is differentiated because you're passing in an ID, but the get post, update post, and delete post all look and have the exact same endpoints, but the HTTP verb that you're passing to them is going to signal to your REST API where it should route that specific call. Okay, so now that we have our endpoint naming conventions changed to what you typically find in a REST API, we're going to talk about something called middleware. Now, there's a lot of other frameworks such as Express that heavily rely on middleware, and all middleware is a function that fires between the request object and the response. So it's right in the middle there, and you can do a lot of things that you would commonly do in your functions with one piece of code, such as checking a authentication token or validating a request body. So if we go and we look at our create post, I'm just going to shut all these down. We'll go to the create post in our index.js. You'll see that we have some common functionality that will probably be shared among a lot of different functions, and that is validating the request body and the schema of the request body. Now, unfortunately, Azure Functions do not have middleware built in, and they actively try to get you to use something called their API management service that we're not going to cover in this video, but luckily there is a package called Azure Middleware that we can add to the project by running a command in our terminal. So what I'm going to do is open up a new terminal and run the following command: npm install Azure Middleware and Joy. So this is a package from npm that allows us to add middleware, and Joy is a schema validator that we can use to validate the body that's being passed in, and therefore eliminating a lot of this code that we find right here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And now that those are installed, we can start working on our middleware. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file in create post, and I'm going to call it handler.js. And typically what I like to do is move all of the business logic into here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a method called const create post. We're going to set this to an arrow function, and we're going to pass in a context, because that's what middleware is going to pass into it. And then down at the bottom, I'm just going to say module.exports create post. We're going to come back in here. So we'll grab all this. I'm going to cut it, and we're going to come back to the handler, and inside this method that we created, we're going to paste it in there. we're going to change, I guess we should change this to context because that's what the function is using. So we see all that passed in. Now, one thing you need to remember here is that since we're using middleware and we want to return something, we have to let the context know that we're done. So if we get to the end of this method, we'll just call context done. And same thing if we get an error. Now, since we're going to be writing middleware to check our body, we don't need these if checks anymore. Let's get rid of that. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now what we're going to do is in the root of our project, let me close all these down. We're going to create a folder called middlewares, or we'll just call it middleware. And inside of here, I'm going to create a JavaScript file called validator.js. Inside of here, we're going to create a method. We're going to say exports.validate body. And what we're going to pass into here is we're going to pass async. We're going to get the context, the body, and the schema. And then we're going to say try if we don't have a body. We're going to pass back a CTX or CTX. We'll just call this context to keep this, the naming convention, the same in all the files. So we'll say context.res. We're going to pass back a 400. And we're going to say the body is request body is empty. After that, we're going to say, well, we got to do a context.done, and then we're going to return out of this. So we'll let the function know that we are done, and we will return so we don't execute anything else in here. Then what we're going to say is await schema.validate async. And we're going to pass in the body. So schema is part of that joy package that we added earlier, and we'll go over exactly how to set up your schema after we're done creating this. So we're going to catch the error, and then we'll say ctx or context.res. We're going to set a status of a 400, and the body is going to be the error message. And then we will pass back context done to let the function know that we are done executing and not to go on to any other middleware. So now that we have that, let's head back to our index.js. We won't need this anymore. Actually, we won't need anything in this file any longer. So what we're going to say const JOI, and this is our validator package, equals require joy. We're going to say const middleware handler equals require Azure middleware. We're going to say const create post, and we actually need to wrap that in brackets, or actually we don't, I'm sorry. So we're going to say const create post equals require handler, and that's referring to this, and since we did a module exports, it should be the default that comes out of that. And then we'll say const validate body, and we do actually need to wrap this because inside of our validator we exported it like this, which makes us have to import it and destructure it because we might want to add a lot more validators to our validator.js file. So back in our index, we'll say require. We're going to go up one to middleware and validator. And now we can start setting up our method. So we're going to say const create post equals new middleware handler. Then we're going to chain a method onto this by calling .use, and we pass a function into this, and all we're going to do is pass context. And this is where our middleware will live. So I'll denote that and say this is where to put middleware, your middleware logic. So we're going to call our validate body We're going to pass in the context to it, the body, context.body.request, and then we're going to pass in our schema, which we have not created yet. So up here at the top, we're going to create our schema for this, and we're going to be using Joy to do so. So we're going to say const schema equals Joy, and we're passing in an object, and then so we're going to call object, which is a function, and then we're going to call keys, which we pass in our keys. So in our request body, we should have the blog, and we're going to set that to joy.string.required. So it has to be a string and it's required. And then we're going to call, or we're going to add title. It's going to be the same thing, joy string required, and then we'll add content. And as the earlier ones, this one is the same. So it's a string and it is required, and we pass that into our middleware logic. Next, we're going to chain another use on here. And this is where we're going to call our create post handler. And I just realized all these are named the same, so this is going to throw errors. Let's go back to our handler function and name this create post handler. Export that, and then we'll come back and we will change the name to create post handler, and we will pass in that create post handler to our next use. Now that we have that, we can chain another method called catch, and this will handle any errors that we get. And we'll pass the error, and we'll also pass the context into this. So if we do get an error, we're just going to return, we'll say context.res equals, we'll take a status of 500, and we will return the error message. And then below this, we just need to do a context.done to let the function know that we have finished. And the last thing we need to do is chain one last method on here of .listen. I'm going to go ahead and format all that. That all looks good. And then lastly, we just need to export it. So module.exports create post. So let's save all that. And it looks like I made a typo up here. So this needs to be context.rec because we're looking at the request body. So context.rec body, everything looks good there. We'll save again. And then I'm going to launch a development server here. And everything looks good. So I'm going to open up Thunder clients. You can use whatever client you'd like. We will grab the request we had earlier. I'm going to go to the body, and it doesn't look like I'm passing in the content. So we're going to go ahead and test this to make sure we get the correct error message. It looks like I have some breakpoints in here. So we get the correct response, which is a 400 bad request. It's saying content is required. I'm going to go ahead and delete out the title just to make sure that we have some correct error messages coming back. It says title is required. Let's delete blog. Blog is required. And if we send no body, its request body is empty. So let's add all that back in. Let's say that the blog is still diligent dev. Got to wrap that in quotes. We'll pass in the title. And we will set this to validation test. And we'll pass in some content here. And we will set this to, this was a test of our validator. And we're going to go ahead and send this. And since this is just spinning, it's letting me know that I must not have put a context.done somewhere. So let's stop this. And if we head back to our index.js, I can see where the error is. We go ahead and validate the body, but we never let the function know to move on to the next use block. So to do that, right underneath this validate body, we're just going to call context.next. I'm going to go ahead and save that and launch another development server. Come back over here. I'm going to hit send. Had a breakpoint in there, come back, and now we get exactly what we should have gotten back. And now that we've got our middleware working in the project, let's go through the process of deploying it. So what I've done is logged into the Azure portal, and up here at the top, you see I do have the option for a function app, but if you don't have it, you can just search up here for function app. We're gonna go ahead and click on it, and then we're gonna go click create. We're gonna choose our subscription and our resource group. Then we're going to name our function app. I'm just gonna name it Azure REST API Tut. Then we're going to choose our runtime stack, which would be Node.js. And I'm just going to use version 14 and I'm going to leave it in central. Now, one thing I do like to check is to make sure that the plan type is consumption serverless. So you're only going to be charged for what you use, and they give you 1 million invocations. And for the most part, it is free. I'm going to click review and create and then click create. And once it's done deploying the project, I will be right back. Okay, so the deployment was successful, and we can click on go to resource. Once we are in here, we can go down to deployment center right here under deployment, and then it's going to ask us where our source code lives, and currently mine is on Bitbucket. So you're probably not going to see this right away. You'll probably say something like authorize account. And you're going to have to click on that button and then log into whether you have GitHub, Bitbucket, or Azure repos. And then once you have that, we're going to click on organization, diligent dev, select the repository, which is somewhere in here. Let's see if we can find it. There it is, all the way at the bottom. And then we're going to select the branch, which would be the master branch, and we're going to hit save. Once this is done, what it's going to do is it's going to reach out to Bitbucket. It's going to grab your latest branch push, or I'm sorry, your latest master branch push, or whatever branch you wanted to use there. And it's going to go ahead and build the project. And you can click on the logs here, and it might take a second. Let's refresh. Let's give it a second, and I'll be right back. Oh, there it started. So it's running the deployment right now. And what it's going to do is go ahead and build out the project. And these new changes, what we'll do is we'll push them to Git, and then it'll pick it up. But I'll be right back after it has deployed the functions. Okay, so in the logs, it said it was successful. So what we can do now is we can go back to the project. What I'm going to do is click here, and then I'm going to commit all of these changes. So we'll say added body validator, or we'll just say added middleware, and route changes. I'm going to go ahead and push this up. And then if we come back here and we refresh, we can see that it is pending right now. You'll see that now it's running a deployment after I refreshed again, and it'll have our commit message in there. So I'm just going to step away again for 1 second, and then we'll come back and I'll show you where to get your function URLs. Okay, so you'll see that it was successful and that it's active. Now what we can do is we can come up here to this function menu, click on it, and now we see all of our functions that we created in the project. Now to get the URL so we can call these from Azure, click on it. And then we're going to click on this get function URL. And this is the URL that we can use to call the blog posts. So this is a get. Let's go ahead and go back and grab the post. Or I'm sorry, that was the post. Let's grab that. And we will copy it. I'm going to come back into Thunder Clients. And if we paste this in, and for some reason it puts, like you're going to have query params on the end, you can just delete that. I don't think it should matter, but we'll make the blog diligent dev. We will say Azure test. This was a test of our function in Azure. And let's send it and see what happens here. So I got a 500 internal server error. Now I did finally get it to work, and the reason we were having this issue is because if we go and look at the table service, we have this environment variable right here. So we need to let Azure know that we have that environment variable and also pass it to it. So what you need to do is come down to this configuration, and I've already added it here, but to add it, all you'll do is click on add new application setting. and then you'll specify the name for it and put your value in there. And like I said, I already did that. So now we can head back up to functions and we can go ahead and grab whatever we need out of here. But like I said, I had already made a call and we see that it came back correct. So I put Azure test. This was a test of Azure Functions. And what we can do is we can just do a get and we can pass in diligent dev. I'll go ahead and remove this. And there it is. I forgot the S on there, but we can see we're getting everything coming back from it. We could get a specific post if we passed in a row key. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab this one here, put it on there. And we get that back right there. So that's gonna go ahead and wrap it up for this tutorial. I hope you guys got some value out of it. And if you did, please make sure you smash that like and subscribe button. It really helps out my channel. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about this video, go ahead and drop a line in the comment section below. And until next time, happy coding.